Common Gamer here. I am now doing the 11 Days of Remembrance video. All these videos is to honor the veterans who fought in World War I and World War II so that I could be free, so I could do these YouTube videos. Alright, let's start, shall we? Europe. The war against fascism. The road to war. The seeds of conflict. The origins of World War II lie in the immediate aftermath of the Great War. Britain, France, and America had claimed victory from the slaughter of the Western Front and were in a position to negotiate terms to improve starving Germany. The terms were fundamented in the Treaty of Valence, 1919. Universal compulsion to the German army was forbidden, a virtual impermanent part of the country. The Richmond was to regard the German state was forced to pay existing reservation far from creating a temporary peace. This measure bred among and hatred. The German people saw the caricatures of the spoke of Germany, a heroless, moralless chaos. Determined condition, such stages might gradually have been forgotten had it not been for the Great Depression, which forced most Western industrialized countries to suspend trade links with other countries. Germany, already weakened by an hatred to the terms of the Valence Treaty, was particularly badly hit in the 1920s. Unemployment rose to 6 million. The mark was greatly distributed and international trade such as was hard to overcome the barrier as economic chaos. Germany was being torn apart by political state. Russian revolutionary ideas had influenced the liberal German intelligentsia, and communist-led strikes, and police fought running battles throughout the streets of Berlin. The street public trained with the inhabitants of democratic government to control events, and to millions of Germans the dream of strong, diverse rule soon became highly sensitive. There were plenty of extreme right-wing groups willing to make the dream a reality. Both recognized the National Socialist Nazis who gathered notoriously in 1923, where one of the leaders, slightly built toothbush an ex-army corporal called Adolf Hitler, was jailed for a coup attempt in Munich. Hitler was jailed for a coup attempt in prison. Hitler sat down his political ego in a book, Munich, My Struggle. On his release, he immediately set abroad counter pursuing control over the Nazi Party and federation of a that would attract a certainly percentage of the German electorate come down to side with the underdog. The estate of the put on backing small shopkeepers against international banks and farmers against the moral degradation of the cities. He brought against the terms of the Valence Treaty and present a confirmed scapegoat for the economic collapse. International Jewry, he stopped the racial roots of true Germans and set out his content of Lisbon living space. In January 1933, Adolf Hitler became Reich Chancellor, given office by over a third of German voters. With days of coming into power, he made a show of strength by declaring all meetings by the German communists illegal. 4 weeks later, on the 27th of February, the German parliament building, the Reichstag, caught fire, and Hitler used the blaze as an excuse to clamp down on his enemies. He on full-blown search were called out in force, and many communists were arrested. The same night, four of the right turned with and executed. The general election that followed gave Hitler and the Nazis complete control. Stories about the Nazi attitude to the Jews were already common in Europe, but the true nature of the new German government only became apparent after Hitler plugged on his own party. In the summer of 1934, over 1,000 privileged opponents and rivals for power were shot. When the brown-shirt SA leader Ernst Röhm was arrested by Hitler in prison, the shockwaves were left by fascist parties the length and breadth of Europe. At the end of the year have given completely silent for some months. The Germans' head of state, Marshal Hindenburg, died, and Hitler adopted the title Reichsführer. In the first years of leadership, Hitler gained control over every aspect of German life. All political parties were disbanded. Trade unions were replaced by state-run labor front. The limited government of German provinces were abolished, and the Nazi Party and German state declared the same. Hitler also made challenges to the army. German soldiers had to take an oath in which they promised unconditionally obedience to Adolf Hitler, leader of the Reich and people. Those few intersects led to him, such as the church, were recognized control. This the last time a German court is going to declare someone innocent whom I have declared guilty. And Hitler was protested. The Martin Buller was sentenced to Nazi-run Germany. Opposed to Hitler had to be a criminal business. The thing of whispers and guns for anti-Nazis had a great deal to fear. A joke about the Führer might lead to democratization and arrest, and spies were everywhere. People were encouraged to keep watch out for their neighbors on the ground of post-traumatic information. Their parents, the first concentration camps were set up for ideas, subversions, and under the Nuremberg decisions of 1935, Jewish descendants began to disappear, never to be heard from again. To swim against the tide regime agricultural photograph, such as the iron grip that Hitler exerted over Germany in the mid-1930s, that is sometimes forgotten that the first truly fascist state was Italy. Bruno Mussolini, known as Second Deuce, had come to power in Italy as early as 1922. though he never to acquire the same degree of personal control as Hitler. The slogan "Mussolini is always right" printed on walls all over Italy may have been a sign of decoration. He did set in place the political fascist state, a vast covered in burn, criticizing secret police and uniform. Mussolini also had imperial ambitions. He dreamed of creating a modern Roman Empire in the Mediterranean, with himself as Caesar. To the end, he sent his armies to Libya and Abyssinia, where glorious military triumphs were recorded against handfuls of ill-equipped desert tribesmen. Hitler took note of this example, and his emulates were more fervent. Other European countries also had fascist movement, and by 1934 they were on the march. The right was permanently victorious in France, where rotting ex-servicemen forced the government out of office. In Austria, the Socialist Party was 7 days of armed resistance, and Chancellor Albert Dollfuss was assassinated by the Nazis in July that year. Preparatory to the Angus Hitler formed Union of Austria and Germany in 1938. In Spain, there was mounting fascist opposition to the leftist Republican government. The Western democracies watched the events as this in a state of perilous non-information was the watchword of the day. So few were sputtered up to the international rule of law, so introduction created by the post-war Allies to avoid further large-scale conflict between unreal. By the mid-1930s, the League of Nations had already begun to lose its influence. States. Japan took no notice of its protest in 1931 when its troops marched into Moshea. Mussolini ignored its citizens when he occupied Asabana in 1936. Hitler quit the League in 1933. He remained president of Reichswehr in 1936, raised secretly a whisper into. By the late 1930s, the scales had been tipped further towards war. By the summit of those nations were created peace in the Soviet Union. Joseph Stalin believed the capitalist powers would try to unite to bring down his regime. He was more prepared to counter the fascist Hitler and rule the perhaps recognized Revolution of 1939, by which Poland and the Baltic states were cut up like a cake to be shared between the Reich and Soviet Russia. The Russian nations also had done Hitler a bedrock of his exercises in the same way Mussolini was having for Italy. From Bolshevism, the fascists were originally hoped passing evil. They were another factor that Hitler was able to expose the protect of another war into revolutions in British and French prosperity, both still reeling from the cage of the Western Front. Prussians fought shy of the question of retirement and was successful. Sun code. Army and Navy budgets were cut. Crowning Neil embarked on a massive platoon of for getting Germany into a weapon of war that had believed would one day, and sooner rather than later, conquer Europe. Well, that's it for today. If you see a veteran, walk up to them and say thank you, and ask and see how their day is going on. You know, not know. They might be having a bad day, just go and buy them a coffee, tea, chocolate bar, whatever, and just talk. They may want something to talk to. Well, I thank the veterans because I can do these videos because of what you did in World War II and World War I. Thank you. This concludes the first video of the 11 Days of Remembrance.